Hey, welcome to the Cam and Otis Show. On this episode, new good friend, Bob Lambert, Navy vet. And by the way, if you're checking your calendar on how the math on when we record the shows and things like that, today is Veterans Day. So thank a veteran, and I'm going to thank one right now. Bob, thank you for your service, man. I appreciate what you did for our country.
Yeah,
And welcome to
back
the
at you,
show.
Otis. Back
Yeah,
at you.
thanks. And Bob, you've time in the Navy, business world, entrepreneur. How did you shift from Navy guy to entrepreneur? What kind of was the recipe, the catalyst, the kick in the butt, whatever happened?
Well, that's a great story because coming out, ended up landing with a little company called Nestle, and I was, and I have to be honest with you, two things happened there. Was the fact that I got picked over an Ivy MBA. Was two things that the guy that hired me said. He said, number one, I was a veteran. Number two, I was an Eagle Scout. And so those two things were really in my favor and outweighed, an Ivy Leaguer with an MBA. So, but again, that was back in the day, back in the 60s. So, but yeah, and I have to tell you, that was a great transition for me because the disciplines that I learned, also applied in that particular case, because we had a lot of veterans in management in the company. So it wasn't a hard transition that way because they understood the mentality and also they kept up with the discipline. So I had phenomenal training, in that experience. So I was there for a decade. I will tell you that the transition didn't come by choice. In 3 days' time, I think I kind of told you about this. In 3 days' time, I was summarily fired from my 10-year career, turned 30, and was asked for a divorce on the third day. So that was a rough landing, that day. So that really launched me into looking outside of the corporate world, as it were, and saying, hey, that was a bad experience. I got to tell you, that kind of knocked my pins back. Some of it was deserved. I'll be honest with you there, but yeah. So that made me start looking in a broader perspective, and boy, did that open my eyes up, man! Oh man. So I did get to work with an entrepreneurial company that I earned some sweat equity in. So that gave me my first taste of that. And also, wow, the experience of having that kind of freedom. Now, I had a great owner that I worked for. He was a top executive, JWT, which is one of the top agencies in the world at the time. And just a great guy. But he also was a military veteran. He knew how to kick me in the butt sometimes, so that was a great experience. But he also shared
That
with me and
sounds like that
showed
was
me.
a perfect transition space, Bob. Because
Yeah,
you went Navy to corporate,
yeah,
and then you went into this entrepreneur startup world where it was like everybody where it does everything, but you had that guy
yeah,
that really got you. Yeah,
yeah.
please keep going.
Yeah, and that was wonderful. I mean, it was just a wonderful experience, but ended up through some acquisitions, some other things I rolled out of that, and then ended up starting a business, and so and that was one of three that I started. So, but that gave me a great framework because that was about a 4-year period of time that I spent there, and then coming out of that, then getting into the agency business and more of my marketing background than sales and blending those two together. So, yeah.
Sales is always something, every so often. Matter of fact, I was just watching a video for another one of the nonprofits that I support. It's a Special Operations Transition Foundation, and they focus on Green Berets transitioning out of active duty. And I was watching one of their videos last night, and the guy was talking about the hardest thing he's had to do is to learn to sell himself. And I'm curious because that's, I mean, those y'all out there, I'll have Bob talk about it later, but Bob knows a thing or two about sales. So I'm curious how that happened. Camden, I'm using the C word again. Dadgummit.
Yep. 1-0.
Well, that has to go back into boyhood because I was a shy kid, literally, but because through scouting, And back in the day in Cub Scouts, we had a thing called sale of hot cross buns. I don't know if you remember that or not, but they were literally kind of a Parker roll with a frosted cross on it, around into Easter time. And, and there was this, I forgot what the prize was, but it was something I wanted. And so, man, I went out there and just hustled everybody. Now, you have to understand, some of the community I lived in, I knew I was related to about half the people. So, it was like tapping the community and tapping the neighbors and everything. So I kind of had a bit of an unfair advantage over my other Cub Scouts, but, and my dad took bunches of it into work, and all that kind of stuff. So that kind of got me going, got me out of my shell a bit, to be a little bit more out there and kind of taking risk, and asking people and all that. And the more I did it, the more comfortable I got with it. I thought, hey, okay. So they said, no, well, that's okay. It's nothing personal. It's just that they weren't going to do something at that time. So I kind of developed a thicker skin along the way. And that, because you have to have a thick skin if you're in sales. You got to be able to put up with rejection. And, but it's not, you got to understand not to take that personally. And by the way, to your point, Otis, everybody's in sales. We're selling something all the time, whether it's a spouse undoing something, or your kids or whatever, we're always doing sales. Now, unfortunately, sales has become a 5-letter dirty word, okay, and associated with some bad behavior and everything like that, and rightfully so sometimes. So back in the 80s, I actually blended my marketing background and sales background to really start talking about business development, bringing those two together because they operate synergistically together. So business development is the new word for sales today. So that's the code word. If we want to do military terms, we had code for it now. It's called business development. And we believe anybody that touches the customer is in business development. Anybody. Okay. So those are kind of the things that we set up. But when you asked me about that, I went through a tremendous amount of training too, Otis. And I have to tell you something, I fall back on that all the time. The training I had, the mentoring, the coaching, all those things are tremendously important, much like the stuff you're doing. I can't talk about that enough, and I can't encourage people enough to get a mentor, get a coach. I don't care what flavor they are, but get somebody that really is going to come up alongside you and help you.
I'm wondering, Bob, were you born with that thick skin? Because I think for a lot of people, it took a couple rounds going around, knocking on doors and things before they develop that thick skin. You got to run home crying to mom and all that kind of stuff. So what was that experience like for you?
Yeah, like I said, I was a shy kid. I wasn't an outgoing kid and in that kind of thing. I was kind of I was an artist, so I was really sensitive about my stuff, but it was through that experience, through scouting. I got to give a lot of credit to scouting. And, my dad was one of my heroes. I mean, he was a guy that was out there. I got to tell you something, just being around my dad, he could walk into a restaurant and and we all got bored with this because it was like, going to a restaurant was like a 2-hour experience because he got to know everybody in the doggone place. I mean, he knew the waitress, her kids, their family history. I mean, it was just amazing. So my dad also was kind of an example of being somebody that was out there, and just being engaged, being relational. I would share with you that really that's what it's about. We're coming back around to that. And I'm really happy to see people are starting to realize, and COVID did a lot for that, is getting back to really genuinely caring about somebody else and really understanding who they are and what they are. Prior to COVID, I got to tell you, it was all about, it's what I call my favorite radio station, WIIFM. What's in this for me? And man, I got to tell you, there was a lot of that going on. So I think we're turning the corner on. I'm seeing a little bit more interest in phone calls now, getting on the phone with somebody, not all this digital chatter back and forth, Zoom like this. At least, thank goodness we have something like this through the pandemic. But to your point, Camden, yeah, I like to say it was real easy and all of a sudden like, hey, I was born that way. No, I wasn't born that way at all. And, but I had, I think the big thing is you just got to learn that this isn't personal. If you get rejected, it's not personal. It's just somebody making a decision that just didn't happen to go your way, And
that's such a great life lesson. And, you nailed the thing about we are all in sales. I'm trying to remember the book. I think it's called On Selling. Heck, without being obvious and turning around and looking on my shelf, a guy I was working for several years ago had me read it. And yeah, it was an eye opener for me because it did help me realize that even in the Army, in the Green Berets, I had to sell constantly. Because if
Yep.
I had an idea, an operation,
Yep.
or just this is the way we should do it, boss, I had to
Yep.
sell that product and
Yep.
that way of doing things to him.
And I'm sure he rejected you sometimes. And no, we're not doing it that way.
Oh yeah, I got a couple of sit down and F up, Otis.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I've heard that a couple of times in my career, let's just say. But
Yeah.
I think that reminder, and it's really weird how, and maybe it's all the, the used car salesman commercials that gave us that, it becoming the dirty word, or the perception that, that guy took me,
Yeah.
in that sort of sense. He was using the trickery of sales. And
Well,
yeah, there's some trickery out there.
well, we do it. And again, our approach is a whole lot different. We flipped the
Mhm.
coin on selling back about 25 years ago. We took the approach, it's about the buy, not the sell. So I literally coach, teach, and train people how and why people buy, not by how you sell them. That was a big tipping point for a lot of people. It took the pressure off too. You're just having a conversation with another human being, and the conversation happens to be around business. And if we're interested in that, both of us, then it's a two-way street. Also, it's an even keel situation. You're not subservient to this buyer. You got equal rights here, and you can ask any doggone question you want to ask. It doesn't mean they're going to answer it. But what I found, when you do ask these great questions and you do just put it out there instead of just thinking about it or perceiving something's going on, where you actually ask the question, because we have one theory in Samurai, and that is, number one, it means nothing unless it comes out of the buyer's mouth. Unless they tell you, it's nothing, because you get into a lot of perception, about what you think, or you're projecting what you think the buyer's selling, or what they're saying to you. That's just wrongheaded, because you don't know. You're not clairvoyant. You're not God. How are you going to read these guys' minds? The other thing, because the buying decision is set up as a natural model of how people make decisions. Okay. Selling, regular traditional selling, is like swimming upstream. It's going against that natural order of how people go through things. And the cool part about with our clients, everybody goes through a process when they're making a buying decision. They go through the same kind of a process. Now it's messy, it's all over the place, but it's a process that's been around since the dawn of man. I mean, we didn't create anything new here. It's just that, oh, hey, why don't we do it the way that God created it,
Mhm.
And so when you do that, and I illustrate that, well, people then that are selling it go, well, yeah, I do that. Well, why do you think the person sitting across the table from you is any different than you? They're not, and you basically, as I tell people, you're kind of like a tour guide helping them get through this process. That's it. So it takes a lot of pressure off.
Sorry, I thought you were going to go, Dad. But one of the things I wanted to or not hound on, but talk about a little bit more was what you were saying with Dad about the used car salesman. Now we kind of have this bad perception on it. And what I think is really interesting is how you can set things up. The economics answer here is it's not a zero-sum game. People are buying because they want something. It's a fundamental rule there. But what I think is so interesting is even when you set up, the win-win-win type deal, people still feel like it's bad. And I want to dive in on that a little bit more and see, what kind of, whether it's language or, sales styles or whatever it is to help fight that. Because, the story that comes to mind for me was the other day I was on a phone call with a good friend of mine. And Bob, you made me think of this because you said selling your spouse on something. And I was talking about my plans for that night. And I said something along the lines of like, well, I'll set it up to do this because then I can go do that. And then we can both, go and we'll, have a great night and we're all happy with what's happening. And he goes, oh man, that's kind of messed up of you. And I was like, what are you talking about? I gave her thing she wants. I'm getting my thing we want. And then we get to go do the thing we want to do together. It's a perfect deal for everyone involved in the situation. But for some reason, because I was applying that kind of, sales psychology to it, it became bad all of a sudden. So I want to throw that over to you, Bob, and see, how do you fight that kind of a perception?
Well, here's the Holy Grail, guys. It's about trust. Okay. You can't have trust if you're not creating a relationship and being relational with somebody. Okay. And that really means that, and I know it's an overused word, but it's really, let's get real. Okay. Let's get authentic about how we're having a conversation, just like we're doing right now. Okay. This is a conversation between three men, and we're talking about something that is, we could be talking about anything, but when somebody's shining you on, when somebody's not being genuine, they're wearing a mask or whatever the case might be. So there's, one of the old sayings, and you brought up a little bit of it, Cam, people love to buy what they want and need. They hate to be sold. Okay.
Mhm.
And we're living in that environment more and more so because, as I tell people, well, Bob, nobody sold me when I went out to Amazon. I said, well, what are you buying? You're not buying thousands of, $1,000 item or a $10,000 item, because I deal with all B2B. And B2B, boy, they better be trusting you, whether it be a capital improvement product or equipment or whatever it might be. They better be trusting you. You're going to be able to deliver. And here's the dirty little secret. It's trust in you first, and then the company that you represent. Okay. It's you first. So you have to establish that. And the best way to establish rapport or get into that whole thing with people is to ask them pertinent questions. So we teach the Socratic method of questioning. Socrates once said, I can't teach a man anything. I can only ask him questions to make him think. Voltaire said it even better. Judge a man not by his answers, but by the questions he asks. So the secret here is to really ask great, relevant questions, intentional, relevant questions. That's going to get them thinking. And there's two magic things that happen when that happens. I don't have any clinical explanation for this, but generally speaking, when you ask a great high, hard one, and somebody flinches their head, or they go, you see the surprised look, or they go, wow, that's a great question. A couple things are going on. Hey, that's a great question. Geez, I never thought of that before. Or, he must know the answer to that. Why would he ask me that question? With the more credibility that you earn with somebody, the more they trust you. So to your point, Cameron, the more that you ask questions and genuinely are interested in them, this can't be just a fake thing. You got to be genuinely. Best salespeople are curious. They're very curious. And I've seen them of all stripes and colors, believe me, guys that are really shy. I had a guy that I worked with and trained that came off a farm in Iowa. He was one of our top salespeople because he was just genuine. People love the guy. They would trust him with anything, and he wasn't putting it on or shining on. And then I've dealt with people, they're highly demonstrative, and really articulate and really do a good job, have a great presence and all that. And they were top people. You can only count them on one hand, I guarantee you. Around the world, buyers have assessed salespeople that they rate excellent. There's only 4% that they rate excellent. Only 4%. Okay. And they don't call them salespeople. They don't call them anything like that. They call them part of our team. They're part of our group here. Okay. And they use three words, three phrases that we pick out that we really like. And two of them we really emphasize. Number one, trusted advisor. Unfortunately, that's an overused word today. Everybody's a trusted. What the heck makes you think you're a trusted advisor? I love it with these wealth management. Oh, I'm a trusted advisor. Well, who said so? But the other two is the one we really are really locked into. Yeah, really we're locked into, and that is trusted asset and a trusted resource. So Camden, to your point, words really matter. When you talk about what makes you different, we don't talk about that. We talk about what makes us distinct. Now you think about that difference and distinct looked up in the dictionary are interchangeable, but doesn't distinction have a hierarchy in your mind's eye? Doesn't there a call out distinguished medal of honor, distinguished gentleman, distinguished house, whatever that might be? So there's a call out in that makes you unique. And so the use of, and we lost the art of language, frankly, of even asking great questions. So that's where we get the kind of a performance increase that we get, because once people get on a roll with this, and by the way, we're not prescriptive. It's a model, put your own fingerprint on it, use your own personality on it, but here's a model for you. We know it's successful. We've been doing it for a long time. Matter of fact, God created it that way. It's just a typical model, So I don't know if does that help at all?
I think so. And
lower the heat on that.
I do. And I want to really emphasize, because Bob, you were talking about the difference between, distinct and different. You said distinctive gentleman. You say that's a different gentleman over there. Ooh, that sounds funny. That's not a good person that you want to, ooh, there's a different gentleman walking around my house. Yeah. You better shut the windows.
Yeah. And I say it all the time because I use exactly that analogy. Well, Camden's kind of different, but you see this all the time. But here, our point of difference, I got to tell you something. It's just an overused phrase. Number one, it has no meaning because what? What makes you take the name off of most people's stuff and there's nothing different. It's the same stuff, all different. But when you make it distinct, all of a sudden they call out in their minds, yeah, that is distinct. That is something I haven't seen before. So hopefully that helps,
I'm going to use my words. And refer to the fact that you are a distinct person because you are an Eagle Scout.
Thank you. Yes, it
And-
is. Yeah.
And so am I. Not many people know that because I don't, don't have it hanging up anywhere or anything like that. But what I'm wondering is, and because I've been thinking about it myself, is what's the leadership lesson you learned as an Eagle Scout that, is still in that back pocket reference point for you?
Yeah, thank you for asking. I learned a lot. Scouting gave me a lot. And I was, again, very blessed. As I said, my dad was my hero. The only thing I topped my dad in scouting was that I was an Eagle with 3 palms. I got every single merit badge. He was an Eagle with 2 palms. But other than that, it stopped at that because he was a wood badge earner and he also was a Silver Beaver Award winner. Okay, so dad was my hero. And that was also, he walked it too. I saw his leadership. I saw what he did with boys, how he really cared and how he lifted them up. There was a young man that was in the troop that I was just a little bitty shaver, and he ended up becoming a priest. Well, he became the priest of our parish at one time, and he's retired since then. He came to my dad's wake and everything like that, and recanted stories about dad, about his leadership and what he taught him and all that stuff. So I would share with you, Otis, that had a lot of framing me out, not only from the standpoint of what leadership looked like, because you become a patrol leader. I was a leader in the troop and all that. But the other thing is that you really start to learn, particularly when you're put in a leadership, type of a role at that age. You got to herd the cats in. You got to get everybody cooking on the same, on the same Dutch oven. You got to get everybody doing the same activities. And that's no small feat, when you're working with people that are your age category. So you learn something. And again, leadership is a lot of selling, right? If you want to get people to follow you, you've got to be a leader where you're embracing people following. Okay. Mm-hmm. That's what leadership is really about. It's not about telling people to do this and do that and being, although, military, when I went through it, obviously was command and control. And also my first corporate experience was a lot of command and control, There's nothing wrong with that. I think there has to be a leader. Somebody's got to lead, but yeah. And thanks for asking that question. I don't think anybody's ever asked me that question before. That's great. You pulled a good one out of me today.
Well, like you said, Bob, that everyone's in sales. One of the ways I like to think about it is that a leader's job is to sell their team on the vision. And because especially, you're thinking about your case, I immediately thought back to my rugby days. One of the best advice I ever got from my dad was, the hardest thing you'll ever do in life is to be a leader of your peers. Same type of thing. Leading that same age group is really difficult. And when you're just the same punk ass kid as the other punk ass kids on the team, and you're trying to get them to go work out and run and put in the hard work and pay attention and listen and all these kind of things, the only reason they're going to do that is if you have some beautiful vision of what they're going to get at the end for it. For rugby, it's a state championship. That's all we would talk about. It's like, okay, do you want to get there? Right. I know what it's like. I've been there and it's an amazing thing. I want that for you. And you sell your team on that kind of a vision. And I'm sure there's the same type of thing in the scouts. Yeah.
Well, again, you get it. You cast it right away because you do, as a leader, you cast vision, and are people going to follow that vision? Do they get it? Do they embrace it? Is there something you're evoking in them? I tell people all the time, I can't motivate a doggone person to do something unless you're holding a 9mm to their head. And they're going to be motivated by fear. Right. But I look at inspiring and equipping and encouraging as the words that I like to use when you're in leadership, because I'll run through a brick wall for a leader that inspires me. Okay. I'm a little bit less reluctant to do that if the guy's just commanding me or put me down or whatever, berating me or whatever the case might be. Now there's a place for some of that stuff, but that's it is what it is. But you hit a good point there. You're absolutely right. Some of this stuff is started, that's why I encourage, I celebrate anybody that tells me they got their kid in scouting. Now again, it was a different era back when I went through because it was exciting, man. You got to go camping, you got to go hunting, you went to camp, and swimming and doing all this cool stuff. We didn't have those options back when I was a kid, we didn't have organized baseball. We had baseball and football and all that stuff, but not at the level it is today. So there's a lot competing. And then you start throwing in, the whole internet and gaming and everything else. There are a lot of things that are competing for these young people. But I have to tell you, like you said, Otis, there's only about 2 million boys that's ever attained since scouting in this country came to be, only about 2 million boys have attained the level or earned the badge of Eagle. So it is an elite group. And just like it is with military personnel, you feel a bit of pride about that and what you went through and how you did that. So anyway, thanks for that. That was, I really appreciate that, reminiscing about that.
Yeah, well, I mean, it was a major part of our lives, you know, and you think about all the effort that you put into it and all the experiences you got, you know, just sitting there
what's your big
thinking about stuff.
what's your big takeaway, Dad, from your time in the Scouts? We've never asked you that.
No, you haven't. You know, and I get to cheat because I thought of the question that I get to think of my answer before I ask the question. And then I get to listen to Bob's answer and think of my answer some more. The advantages of being the host. So, as Bob, you know that too. But, you know, I think I was thinking about that. And I think one of the things I learned was you can't do it all yourself. You got to trust other people to do things. And then you got to, you know, that next step of it is you got to tell them how and what you want done and when you want it done. You can't just throw it out there. You got to trust them to do it, and then, you know, show them how if they need to, or let them run and then tell them, you know, that campfire should have been over there. Or, you know, you just set your tent up in a creek bed. You might want to move out of that, you know? So
and water flows downhill. You might wake up in the morning when, you know, after a healthy rain and you're laying in, you know, a couple inches of water, you know,
floating down on your air mattress too. You know?
Right. Exactly. Well, we didn't even have air mattress back then, dude. You had a luxury.
Ooh,
we were on the ground
back in the day. Back in the day when Boy Scouts was hard, right?
The leaders had cots. They had old army cots that they got to sleep on. We didn't. So we were kids, you know?
Yeah. I mean, you don't feel it as a kid, right? I mean,
it was great.
Yeah.
It was great.
Well, I love that. And the more I think about that, man, it makes me want to sit down and just kind of reminisce about Boy Scouts some more. Somewhere on my shelves, I think I might even have my old Boy Scout handbook tucked in up there, believe it or not.
Yep. I got mine tucked away. Yeah. And when my dad passed, a number of years ago, I was willed in his will all his scouting stuff. So it was really quite a privilege to be able to do that. And just thinking about it, you know, reminiscing, you know, the times that we did spend together and those kind of things, you know, it's great, you know, have those kind of memories.
Yeah. And by the way, my dad was an Eagle Scout also, or is an Eagle Scout, because my dad's still with us, fortunately, you know. Hey, Dad.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah. You know, and we shifted to leadership, and which is really, you know, one of my favorite things to dive into, and thinking that philosophical thing. What's that one nugget that you would share? You know, hey guys, if you only remember one thing as a leader, what would that be, Bob?
Boy, that's a tough one, man. There's so many.
Yeah.
There's so many. I would, and this is probably going to be a little bit distinct. I think great leaders and good leaders I know of are humble. They think about others. They care, not to the point where it's going to be detrimental, but the fact of the matter is, I think humility is underrated. That doesn't make you weak. It's just the opposite of that. I truly admire people that are great leaders that are humble. You know, that they're not self-serving, that they're not braggadocious, that they're, you know, their walk defines them. And I think there's a lot to be said for the walk. As you know, Otis, with my program, I talk about that with leaders a lot, because young people are watching your walk, not the talk. They've seen all this going on for 2.5 decades and people walking in a different direction. And leadership is the same way. You know, you've got to walk it, and people believe in that, they'll follow you. So to me, if I had to pick just one, because there's a whole bunch of them that you put together, I think humility is one of the things. And that certainly is, as you know, being a Christian, my biggest sin is my pride. I have to tell you, I have to be praying on my pride every day. And I got a great thing by Ken Blanchard, which is a great Christian brother, and also, you know, quite a speaker and an author. He said, you know, gave me a simple prayer take. I like this guy because the 1-minute manager is just, you know, a synopsis of something very quickly. He said, take the I out of me, fill me with you, and cloak me in humility. And I have to say that almost every day, maybe multiple times a day, because my pride can get in my way.
I love that. The I out of me, Dang
Fill
it.
me with you, fill
Yep.
me with you,
Yeah.
and cloak me in humility.
Yeah, man, that's great. That's great. And so to kind of spin us into the sales on that, because I think this is one of the things that's interesting. And maybe this may, kind of solve that mystery of the sales dirty word, is that person is doing it for themselves.
Mhm.
And the humble salesman is serving. Would you agree with that and maybe expand on that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. Uh, you know, great salespeople always are in service of the client or the prospect. How can I serve you? How can I help you? Now, it may not be that I have something that actually fits with what you're doing or what I can provide to you. And the big mistake salespeople make is try to shoehorn that in. They try to manipulate that around to, okay, now this is something you really need this. And then, no, it's far away from what I need. And so basically just being honest and forthright about that, if I'm not a fit for somebody, and we don't sell people, we look to see if there's a fit. Okay. Very distinctive type of thing that you need to be talking about. Is there a fit? And if there's a fit, then we're going to know what to do with that. If there isn't, then be honest about it and call it. It's not a fit. But guess what? I want to leave you better off than when I met you. I know somebody that might be a fit for what you're looking for right now. If you would be open to that, let me make an introduction to them. I know them, I trust them, and you're going to be the ultimate decision maker. But this is a better fit, I think, at this time. I've turned down work, frankly, on the sales end because they didn't have their marketing act together. Now, I was in marketing. I can do marketing. I don't do it anymore because there's people a heck of a lot better at it than me. And so, frankly, I'd rather have that hand off. But if you don't have your marketing act together, or what your message is, or what you stand for, or your unique selling proposition, or any of that stuff, what the heck am I going to do train them on? Right. I mean, I can give them all the training in the world, but so what?
Yeah, that's great. Cause thanks for clarifying that. Cause I've often thought about that, the person and the time that you're humble enough to tell that person across the potential client, if you will, across the table from you, that, hey, this isn't the right fit. I don't do that. I'm not the best at that. I can make something up, but I'm going to tell you the truth. I would be making it up. So,
and I would tell you, Otis, I got in business because of that. Just that raw honesty with somebody, they admired that. People really respond to something like that. Boy, I didn't expect that out of a salesperson. They're going to really tell me the truth, and I've gotten people, and they'll go out of their way. It's like, okay, it wasn't fit for me, but hey, I got somebody else, that I want to introduce you to, and it may not come at that time. I've had it happen years later where somebody will throw somebody over the fence and say, hey, you got to talk to this guy. He really was honest with me and I believe him. And he needs that. It goes a long way when you're up front with people like that. I want to jump again back to leadership because you said something that's really important here. And that is sales leadership. I also take sales leadership. And sales leadership is really, there's a definite metric there. Ones and zeros, okay? And it's a tough role. And the unfortunate part about it, and this is not my estimation or anything, this is actual fact. It's estimated between 70 and 80% of sales managers' butts and seats in this country have never been trained to be a sales manager, let alone be a leader, okay? Now, therein lies where we have a big issue, in that. And a lot of that is they take the best salesperson, all of a sudden they're promoting them into a sales job or in a management job. Two different skill sets. That's like taking Michael Jordan and trying to make him into Phil Jackson. It ain't going to work, Highly motivated top sales performers are not good team players. They're all about themselves. They're going to get their piece of it. And it's like babysitting job for them. And they fail. It's a 90% failure rate. Now that's terrible. Now I made that transition when I was in Nestle, going from a salesperson to a manager, but it was stair-stepped and I was prepped all along the way. And here's a big thing that my mentors gave to me. Bob, we know what you are as a salesperson. You're in the top 5% in the world. Okay. But now you're going to have to be in the top 5% as a manager as to what you do with your people. That's how you're going to get measured. Okay. And boy, that was a message they pounded into me real quick. And I learned humility real fast because I couldn't take and impose on any one of my salespeople my method, the way I did it or whatever, because everybody's individual's fingerprints. So I had to get that. And I had to stand back even when and let them fail. That's the other thing I think is highly undervalued. You got to let people fail. You got to let them make mistakes because then they're going to learn. Oh, geez, hitting that brick wall, that really hurt. Maybe I shouldn't do that again.
It's great. And, whenever I hear that, it always reminds me of, something that happened in the Army right about the time I went on active duty in the 80s. And the Army used to have this rank they called specialist. This rank specialist still exists, but it's only at the E4 level. So pretty junior, somebody's been a couple of years in the Army.
Right.
Well, they used to have spec 4, 5, 6.
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And you know what? When I got to my job, I was an engineer. I had guys who were spec 6s, specialists, rank 6. They were very, very good at driving a bulldozer or a bucket loader. They were the best. And then the Army said, no, you're no longer a specialist, you're a leader. And oh my goodness, these guys, it was just some of the most painful fingers on the chalkboard, sort of, trying to get them to go from, hey, you're no longer just the bulldozer driver, you're in charge.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
There's a lot to be said for that.
And then doing it and don't give them any training.
Yeah.
And then don't give them any training. I had the privilege of getting to know a 4-star over here in a neighboring community by the name of Nick Haley. He was actually in Schwarzkopf, Desert Storm 1. And he told the crowd, there was 400 of us in the crowd. And he was asked about, are leaders born or are they made? And he did a great analogy right out the gate. He said, go around to any playground and look at 3- and 4-year-olds or 5-year-olds and see, you can see who the leader is. But yes, they can learn to be a leader. But that's what the military does. He says, up until the day, half hour before we launched Desert Storm, I was in Schwarzkopf's tent getting trained, getting leader. He said, the biggest revelation for me when I came out is getting into these corporations, and they don't do any of that. They don't train anybody. They certainly don't train them for longevity time, and he's right. He's absolutely right. And I think that's one of the failings, the great failings, because we're seeing it now. We're seeing the great resignation happening across the country. 3.5 million people leaving their jobs. Why? They're not satisfied. And, people leave leaders. They don't leave companies. They leave leaders. They leave managers. That's why they leave.
One thing you made me think a lot of, Bob, when you're talking about the sales leadership, sales management, I think there's an interesting thing as a leader, because, as a servant leader, you want to really take responsibility for your team's results. I'm thinking to the rugby lens right now. No matter how hard I work as a coach, if the players mess up on Saturday, it still feels like it was my fault. Like it'll always feel like it was me who should have done something better, all the shoulda, coulda, wouldas. And I think there's the same type of thing when you get into business, where it's like, okay, I have this responsibility for this team. And even if they're not performing at the level that they should, it still feels like that responsibility falls back on you. Now, the other side of that is separating yourself from your team's results, which, frankly, sounds like a terrible idea, because then you're going to be, completely separating yourself from your team's results. You're going to be a terrible leader at that point. So I'm curious, Bob, how would you balance those two schools of thought?
Well, again, it's just like sales, how much of this are you going to take personal? Okay. Now, sales leadership is a lot more personal, because you're living, eating, sleeping, and breathing with these folks that you're leading and trying to lead. And you're down in the thick of it. So it is highly personal. It's just like anything in the service. When you lose a member of the team, in a firefight or anything like that, it's personal, it really is. And you do feel personal responsibility for that, whether it be in the military or out in the civilian life. And certainly I can tell you that a lot of sleepless nights I had, as a leader in a sales team, about how my people were doing, or losing a good team member, for a variety of reasons, but losing a great team member, that was a personal thing. You're right. Something, whether it's a sports team or whatever, you're the coach, you're the leader, you're going to take things personally. I don't know that you're ever going to get, you can get a little bit thicker skinned about it, because guess what? I try to coach and teach this. Only focus on the things you can control. Okay. And I set up if you can imagine a diagram of a 3-legged stool. Okay. I'll give you a little free coaching today. 3-legged stool. And let's just put on the top of that stool, it says goals. Okay. So on the left, and on each one of those legs, we're going to put A, B, C. So what do you have control of and that you have choice over that starts with an A?
Ooh. I wasn't ready for a question. I'll be totally honest, Bob. Let me think. Come on,
Starts with an
Dad.
A. You have choice and you have control over it.
First word that came to mind was accountability for yourself, is what I was thinking.
Okay. I'm not going to make you struggle because we're going to run out of time. Attitude. Okay. Write that down. On the B. Okay. What starts with B that you have control and choice over?
You're making me feel bad this morning, Bob.
You aren't alone. Believe me when I ask people this. What do you say, Otis? What starts with B that you have choice and control over?
I don't know. Budget is the only word that keeps coming to my mind. I know that's not.
Let's try behavior.
Behavior. Yeah.
Do you have choice and control over your behavior?
Yep.
You have choice and control over your attitude?
Yep.
Okay. Now here's a tough one usually, but I'm going to give you a little prompting because you guys are men. Okay. What starts with a C that you have choice and control over? Young ladies that aren't married yet want this out of you. The C. Big word, the C word, commitment.
Oh, that one.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, that one.
I've been married for so long, Bob.
Yeah.
I forgot about that.
I'm fresh. I know that one.
It's a commitment, right? So the metaphor, this took me about 6 months to get this, guys, because you can put anything on the top of the stool you want, but those are the three things you have choice and control over. Would you agree? You don't have control over the weather, the markets, or any of the rest of this stuff, the traffic or anything else, right? But those three, you really reasonably could say, I do have choice and I have control over that. Okay, to a degree. Now, if you have a three-legged stool and one of those legs is shorter than the other one, what do you got? You got a teeter-totter there. You got a stool that's not going well. So nobody's perfect and we can't have it level all the time, but at least you have your focus. So I give all my clients that little exercise and I have them put it on a sticky note because when I'm coaching them, I'm checking in and saying how your ABCs. And particularly in sales, that is really, really important. How's your attitude? How's your behavior? And how's your commitment to do what you're doing and what you got on your list today or going up the hill or whatever it might be, you know? Those I look at, let's focus on the stuff we have control over and all the rest of the stuff we have no control over. So to your point, Camden, you did your job, you coached them, you trained them, you practiced them, you had the plays down. It wasn't your day, okay? Momentum wasn't there, whatever the case might be, the game was off or whatever. But you did what you did. You had them, you had the right attitude, your team had the right attitude going out in the field. They had the right behavior. They're really going to go out there because they're well coached and they had the commitment to win. That's all you had control over.
I think that's a great point. Yeah. And, you know, I've had this conversation with other rugby coaches and I think your point about control is really, really crucial there because it's, you're going back and there's all sort of, you know, Monday morning quarterback things that you could do. And you're looking back, you go, oh, well, you know, I should have done that. But the interesting thing there is finding what is actionable that's inside your control for basically, you know, we're talking sports round for the next week. So it's like, okay, like, you know, I'll take a rugby example. Like our tackling was terrible. So, hey, maybe we should work tackling. Probably should have seen that one coming, you know, and that's an easy example, but it's that type of thing. And then there's the other one where it's like, you know, the other team was just so much better. And they were, you know, so many steps above where it's like, okay, well, yeah, we could have worked on that, but it wasn't actually going to do anything, you know, or, you know, Dad, you've been through this before with coaching. You put in the high level stuff because you want to beat the high level team, but you've got a mid to low level team that doesn't understand the high level stuff and then they fall apart. And so it's recognizing what you're in control of and where your team's at and what they actually need. I think that's a great point.
But I'll take Cinderella teams that you could, you know, name them through history, how they were underrated, underranked, they were undersized or whatever the case, and they rose to the occasion. I mean, you know, like, what is that about? I got to tell you something. That's about being really highly motivated, you know, highly motivated. And also great, you know, great inspiration and great encouragement that you can do this, you know. And so, you know, again, leadership is X's and O's. It really is. And any of this stuff we're talking, it's all human stuff, guys. It's just human stuff. That's how we're wired as human beings. So why do we try to do stuff that isn't, you know, in our nature or what we're looking at? It took me a long time, guys, Cameron, to really get down to that ABC thing. Because I worked on it, kept thinking, we got to get this simpler. We got to bring it down to where people can understand it. And when I have them post that sticky note, someplace where they can see, you know, check in with your ABCs, it's amazing how many of those will bring it up years later. You know, I still have that sticky note, Bob.
Well,
Well, and
it's just a great, simple thing to
Yeah.
use and fall back on.
Yeah.
Did you have some?
what I was gonna say is, we were talking about the humble salesman, the idea of that earlier.
Yeah.
The quiet confidence. What the coach looks like for that underdog team, Bob? It's the quiet confidence. It's not the guy who riling everybody up like, all this. It's just right here. It's right here. We know what we're gonna do on Saturday, and we know we're gonna do it well. And nothing y'all can do is going to change what we're going to do because it's inside our control. And so to bring us all full circle on that.
Yeah, you're right. You're absolutely right. And that sends a message to the other team too.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah.
I love it. Quiet confidence. My father-in-law, I call him quiet gentry. He's kind of like E.F. Hutton. When the guy opens up his mouth, he's a vet. He's a Korean vet. He was a minesweep operation. He was stuck in a hill for 13 days, over in Korea, and had buddies blown up on each side of him. And talk about courage and my undying admiration for this guy. But I call he's got courage, but I admire him because he's got a quiet gentry about him. And when he opens up your mouth, you want to listen to him, and he wasn't a ranked leader or anything. He was a grunt, he was on the ground doing his work. Carried 75 pounds of tools around his waist for 30 years working in a steel mill.
Yeah. Really.
Okay.
Well,
self-educated, by the way, self-educated.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I just wanted to add on that, we're talking about the quiet confidence, you said it, Bob, that somebody like that, when they speak, everyone listens. And if you're the humble salesman, you have that quiet confidence. You're sitting there and it's like, I know y'all need what I have. I know it's going to help you and it's going to make your life better. I'm just going to sit here. I know you'll make the right choice eventually. And you're confident in that. Yeah.
And back to circling back around, it's about the questions you ask, because then people see that they get that, they want that. Now all of a sudden they're asking you, right? And instead of you showing up, and we call showing up and throwing up all over them about your stuff, which they don't, half of it, 3/4 of it, they don't care about, because that's all about you. It's not about them or anything to do with them. Right. So you're absolutely right. Asking great questions, listening is a real art, listening to actually hear, so those are the things that, when I go into a meeting, oftentimes, I say a little prayer and I say, God, give me the eyes to see with, the ears to listen, the heart to hear, and the mouth to speak with. Okay. And it's simple. I like simple. I'm a simple guy, just keep this stuff simple. And it works. But you're absolutely right. It's and again, it gets back to this ABCs. What's your attitude? What's your behavior? And what's your commitment to doing something? It's hard to be humble. I gotta tell you, when you're in sales and you're a high flyer, it's really tough.
Oh yeah. Man, this is the list of what you learned opportunities here are unbelievable today. And I'm gonna go to one that I think just requires that re-emphasis on it. And it's that as a leader, you have to sell your vision to the team, and that's how you get them to commit to it. So that's what I learned. It's a lot of times it's the foot stomper, and that's definitely a foot stomper. Is as a leader, you have to sell your vision to your team to get them to commit. Camden, what'd you learn?
This is an early one. I'm glad I wrote it down because, like you said, that there was a lot of other stuff, and I probably would have picked something else. But in sales, it means nothing if the buyer didn't say it. No assumptions. Don't be walking out, wow, that sales call went so well, I really think they're going to buy it. Well, did they say that? And I love that. That's a good confidence shrinker. That's not the right word. I'm scrambling for the right word there, but that's all right.
It just gets back to the practicality of that, because we're all in our own head all the time, and it's like, perception is reality. Until you get on that side of the table and understand what their reality is, so what? Nothing matters, you can want for them all day long. That was a really tough lesson for me to learn, because I'd walk out of me and go, what the heck? I laid it all out. The X's, the O's, the ROI was all here. Why didn't they buy? Well, first of all, people buy emotionally. Okay. They buy, that's scientifically proven now. They buy emotionally, they justify it intellectually. Oftentimes sales comes at that from an intellectual standpoint and doesn't take in the emotion. I lost sales because guess what? The guy was out playing with my competitor on a golf course, and they really got to know each other and became an emotional thing, or I didn't ask the question that the stuff he was buying now is from a relative, and what's that going to happen over Thanksgiving dinner if he kicks his relative out and he takes me on, it's like, there's a whole lot going on there, and just think about yourself when you're making a buy. And let's say it's a big considered buy. When you're making a big considered buy, okay, are you emotionally engaged in that? Is that something you really want? I would speculate and say, yeah, that's something I want. I want to get that. Otis, you're out hunting and you decide you saw this great new gun and you want to take and buy that doggone thing. And it's $1,500 or $2,000 to buy that gun because it's a great gun, right? Yeah. Well, you're all charged up, buddy. And I'll tell you, you're going to move heaven and earth and everything on the budget to get that gun. Women are the same way. Clothing, jewelry, those Ferragamo shoes, that run $600 a pair or whatever it might be, right? That's all emotional. People buy emotionally, they justify it intellectually. And we got to get on that side of the page. And that's why the setup to do that, Camden, is that you got to get on that emotional side and you got to wait till it comes out of them. By way of example, hey, I'm really having a problem with this area over here, something like that. To me, when that says if you're having a problem, they got some pain. Okay. Mm-hmm. Well, my job is, how bad is the pain? I got to be a good doctor now. I've got to diagnose how bad is that pain before I go prescribing anything. Because if you jump from, symptom to diagnosis, that's called malpractice. And that's what happens with a lot of salespeople. They hear something they want to hear and boom, man, you just jump on them. And all of a sudden you're trying to sell them. And that's the opposite of what you want to happen. Believe me when I tell you, it's counterintuitive. Our whole model is counterintuitive, but it actually accelerates and speeds the whole process if you do it. It's amazing.
What'd you learn?
I learned that you two are great guys and you ask some great questions. And I really appreciate, Otis, you digging in on the scouting thing, because frankly, that was not something I'd ever been asked. And I'm aware of it and that kind of thing, but you gave me the opportunity to articulate that and put a plug in for scouting. I think it's a great institution and I wish more parents would take a look at it, for their kids.
That's great. That's great. Bob, tell us about Samurai Sales and Faith Marketplace. I really want to know everybody to learn about those two opportunities.
Well, you had me talking a lot about sales today. So, that's obviously a passion. Very few of us have the ability to do something that we're really passionate about. And I've had the privilege and the honor of being that in what I do. And what lights me up is being able to take people to a height that they never seen for themselves, to overachieve even things that they didn't even set up for a goal. But Samurai Business Group is a company that coach, teaches, and trains people on how people buy, not how you sell them. And that's a big distinction for us because a lot of this stuff is still old. It's around. I don't teach anything to do with cold calling. It's all B2B businesses or individuals. So we have two offerings. Every other Monday for a whole year, people come into my program, my sales mastery program. It's set up like a martial art. There's 8 lessons. The first 8 lessons are foundational. Next 8 are advanced. That's red belt. And then the black belt is mastery. That's 6 sessions. That's a year-long program because this isn't pixie dust. You're not sitting in there for 5 minutes or 2 weeks and all of a sudden you're going to become a master at anything, just like in a martial art. You go walk into a dojo, you're a white belt, and you go up against a black belt, you're going to get your ass kicked. Okay. So the whole point of this is that it sets up this whole process to go through that you attain a mastery at skills and competency of doing some of these things. Okay. And you own it. It's yours. You put your own fingerprint on it. So that's one thing I do. And so people can sign up and enroll into that. And those, generally speaking, are 6-figure earners that want to, bust it loose. So most of our clients are doubling or tripling their top line revenue within 12 to 18 months when they go through that full program. By the way, that comes with my personal coaching too. So people want to take advantage of that, then I personally coach them to get to the next level. On the other side, and they can join anytime. That's a rotating program. So you get out there, SamuraiBizGroup.com. And we'll do that. On the other side of that, we go into small mid-market companies, all B2B, about 10 million to about 50 million is a range, family-owned, closely held businesses, and really work with their top management to take and elevate their clients. Again, same thing's happening there. I have one client we've had for over a decade. The last 8 years, they've had 25% year-over-year increases, and they lay that at my doorstep. Now, I'm really humbled by that because they did it. I didn't do it, but they attribute it to the training that they got. And boy, they have perfected it. They own it. They really embrace it. Those are the kind of companies that are on a growth trajectory. They want to get better. They're at that point where they're just stuck or whatever it might be, and they need somebody to take them up to the next level. Those are the companies we love to work with. And oftentimes we customize what we do for them. But the core program, 80 to 90% of this fits any company because we're not talking about their stuff. We're not training them on their stuff. Too many companies think that when they train them on their products or their services, that's sales training. It's not. It's information training. Okay. You got to have some of that, but there's too much emphasis on that and not enough emphasis on true selling skills and competencies. And that's what we do. Now you got me talking about something I'm really passionate about, and that's Faith Marketplace. And Otis, thank you again for being on the show. Faith Marketplace is really a thing that happened. It was God ordained. That came to me. Well, we're going on our 9th year now. I can't believe it. And that was basically to connect faith and work. And how do you do that? I had the privilege and honor of being in C12, which is a president, CEO, owner forum for Christian business leaders. And that really taught me how to integrate those two together and how to really build a kingdom business, that is a shining light out into the world. And it's pretty dark right now. So being a shining light, being that light on the hill, getting my light out from underneath the basket, and not being afraid to let people know that I am a Christian and I have values and I stand for something. And that's my encouragement all the time for that. And especially now for leaders, young people, because they're watching you. And it's about the walk, not the talk. There were 3 guys that I call my 3 kings that really led me to the Lord. And they were business executives that I knew. They were in different areas. They didn't know each other, but it was their walk. There was something about these guys that was different. And I thought, what is up with these guys? Because I was in the desert for 36 years. As I tell people, I was godless. I mean, I just, finally God got a hold of me and shook me up pretty good. And thank God it was 21 years ago that I came to the Lord. Well, this whole thing came out of nowhere. If you would have told me, and even my old Bob, I was at, if they would learn that Bob's got this radio program, he's talking about faith and work and all that stuff, they would just be, they'd be roaring, because that wasn't the guy they knew, but anyway, God took over me. So we interview people from all over the country that are in leadership positions. And now my request is to looking for people under 40, because I feel that God's really tapped me. I had 10 under 40 this past year, 4 of them under 30. Young leaders really need inspiration. They need to be lifted up, and they need for somebody, that are more mature to come up alongside them and help them and give them inspiration, give them encouragement, and lift them up. And that's really what God's put me into now, is to try to get this. And I had 2 terrific young people on yesterday. Their interview is going to be coming up a week from Saturday. That has a program out there called Young Successful Leaders for leaders or people under 40. And he's got over 80 people signed up in this thing since last year. and they're doing it on Zoom. It's really coul. So did that help?
Yeah. So just real quick, how do people connect with you, and give us those URLs again so they can look them up and tap into both of those opportunities?
Yeah, the best you want to get me directly, you dial me or text me 847-922-1498. You want to learn more about Samurai Business Group? You can go out and Google Samurai Business Group, or it's Samurai, SAMURAIBIZGRP.com. So that stands for Samurai Abbreviated Business Group, abbreviated. For Faith Marketplace, straightforward. Just faithmarketplace.com. Go out and check it out. And you'll get a hold of me. And, I'm on there. You tap the button. You can do it. By the way, on Faith Marketplace, there's this little thing called a donate button. Okay. So it's a ministry. We could use your help, to support it. We've got very generous support, but we're always looking for people that have a heart for it and they think this is doing good. Go out there and hit the donate button. Okay.
That's great, Bob. I really appreciate it, man. Appreciate your time today. This has been an amazing show. A lot of, man, as my buddy Chris Hoffman always says, a lot of golden grenades. That's his
golden grenade. I love
that's
it.
his phrase. And for our listeners, go back and listen to it again and get your notepad out this time, because man, there's a lot of going on. Yeah. This has been great, Bob. Thank you again for your time. Camden.
Thank you, guys.
Run us out.
I really appreciate you doing this, and thanks for you. Both are great interviewers, great hosts. I really appreciate that.
Thanks.
Appreciate that, Bob. And I would like to take the time to thank you, Bob, and thank you, Dad, for your service on Veterans Day. I know this will be coming out next week, but thank you guys very much for all that you did for our country, keep us safe, and thank you to the rest of the veterans out there and all that they've done. Thank you all for listening to today's show. Special thanks to our guest, Bob Lambert, for joining us today, and our sponsor, Tribe and Purpose. Find your tribe, find your purpose. You can check out recent episodes of The Cam and Otis Show on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts, and check out a full archive at thecamandotisshow.buzzsprout.com. The Caminota Show is on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Thanks again, and we'll see y'all next week.